we're here today to talk more about freight and noise. We're looking at a study that we recently launched. Cross-River Partnership launched a study on noise and freight. This was in August to December last year on 2020. It was commissioned by the Central London Sub-Regional Transport Partnership, which is a collective of transport officers from London's central 10 local authorities. This partnership provides strategic direction for transport challenges in the capital. The idea was to look at retiming of deliveries and noise being an issue, and looking at how this could be tracked with technology and finding a technological solution for improving monitoring of delivery related neighbourhood noise. So this podcast recording is going to talk about the study, and today's expert speakers that we have are Geoff Burns from EMSOL, who was the consultant who did the monitoring, and we also have Kate Neale from Cadogan, who's a landowner in Royal Borough, Kensington and Chelsea, and they own a large estate and were part of the trial. And myself speaking as chair and speaker for Cross-River Partnership. The agenda today is to go through who are the speakers, what the background is, then also the project overview and the findings, and then we'll go into some discussion at the end and the next steps from this study, and then at the end we'll have a little conclusion as well. So just as a bit of background is that the Central London Sub-Regional Transport Partnership is made up of the boroughs, as you can see on the map. In this specific study, we did focus in Kensington and Chelsea as the right place to locate this project. This is from the previous work that we've already done with Cadogan, and also sustainable deliveries that were being looked at in the area. So I'm just going to send on to Geoff now, who's going to go over the project overview and the findings that we got from the study.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to race right through, but before we go into the findings, what I want to do is just give you some context about the EMSOL solution. I think that's really important. So, and context in air quality noise from a very high level. So, one of the reasons that EMSOL exists, when we were founded in 2017, it was very, very much around urban air quality. And traditionally, air quality monitoring is very, very retrospective, or at least it has been in the earlier part. So what you generally get with air quality and noise monitoring is a set of data that you collect over time. And then you get the ability to download all of that data and make some assumptions, make some mitigation planning, and try and really focus on what to do next. However, there are some intrinsic problems to that. So looking at retrospective data to try and make future decisions is always a little bit tricky. And what we really focus on, there's three main areas where we can make that much more robust in terms of data and give you better access to data. So the first thing is that we really focus on supply chain and vehicular movements. And the way we do that is very, very simple. It uses LTE antennas to kind of triangulate the position of vehicles. We put tags in the vehicles. It's just a little £2 coin size tag that sits in the dashboard. But what that gives us the ability to do with our monitors is that every time a vehicle of interest comes within to the location that we're focusing on, we can specifically then start to attribute pollution to that specific vehicle, because we can track it and go through. Now, typically you wouldn't get that. You would just get a very, very big picture of the ambient pollution. And yes, of course, you can make some assumptions, with specific types of pollutants, and you can safely say that that was vehicle activity and things like that. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to put back the emphasis on the supply chain to take accountability for the specific pollution that they are causing. So the three main pieces to EMSOL are real-time alerting. So what we do is we give people who are interested in the solution the ability to receive alerts in real time. And this is new, by the way, this is coming online now. So we've always been able to track the data, but for the next few weeks, we're rolling that particular piece of technology out. So every time there's what we call an EMSOL bridge, that will send an alert to the relevant people to tell them that vehicle A has came into location B and it's causing pollution C. And how we do that is very, very, I'm not going to go into the technical aspect of it too much, but we use the World Health Organization and DEFRA guidelines to tell us whether or not that vehicle potentially could hit those guideline limits. And the way it does that is it uses a 3-minute rolling average, because vehicle visits to certain sites can be very, very small. However, what we want to do is try and stop the pollution before it happens and becomes an issue. So there's a 3-minute window, and if all of the data and all of the guidelines come together and we dilute that down into a 3-minute average, we pop that message out to someone to say, look, there's a vehicle on your site, on your road, outside of your building. It potentially, because the engine's running or whatever, is going to cause a pollution breach. You may want to go and check it out and then mitigate that problem down the line. So that's the first part of it. So the second piece of the EMSOL proposition is really about attribution of data. So we can attribute that to anything. And by the way, it doesn't need to be vehicles. It can be stationary objects, NRMMs. It can be flues. It can be generators. It can be very, very broad in terms of what you tag. It doesn't have to be moving. In some cases, moving vehicles are quite tricky to track, as you can expect. So we can deploy these tags on anything. And then the third piece of it really is, and this is what's really, really interesting sometimes, is that what people want to do is they want to exclude the pollution that they're not causing from their data. So if you have an air quality monitor up on a high street and you're collecting data over time, there's no real way of pinpointing where that pollution comes from, what it's about, and whether you can attribute it to anything. So with EMSOL, you can attribute it, but then you can also exclude. And that's a really, really important key feature to the EMSOL solution. So I just wanted to make that clear, and that might give you some more context when we run through the slides. So we're a young company. We were founded in 2017 by Freddie Tolberg, and Freddie's been around the software business for years and years, has a keen interest in green tech, and we got up to the point whereby we can do big trial sites. We're working with big players like John Lewis and Transport for London and people like that to roll projects out across their businesses. The seed funding was secured in March 2020, so just about the time that we started talking to CRP originally, I think. We've won some awards, and then in 2021, and really my role in the business is to take that good, innovative style company that we are and make it a commercial business. I'm pleased to say 2021, we brought on board some pretty good customers, HS2, Siva, who I think we may be doing some projects with again down the line with CRP maybe, Waitrose, Scantacosti and Strawberg, which is the SCS brand, as you'd well know. And there are some others in the pipeline which are getting ready to deploy, which I can't really talk about today. So that's a little bit of background on EMSOL. So if we had one statement that makes everything I said and takes it down and dilutes it into a statement, we would say that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to empower organisations to take action to improve the health of the local community. We do this through targeted pollution source identification, i.e. the tags and the attribution I talked about, to enable specific mitigations in real time, which benefits the communities our customers operate in. And that's really what we talk about in general. How it works, well, there's something called the EMSOL difference. So as you can see here, it's a slightly busy slide, but the crux of it is we have the tags in supply chain vehicles or NRMMs, like I described earlier. We have noise pollution monitors erected in specific areas, as we do air quality monitors. And then what that does is it enables us to triangulate the position of vehicles that we've tagged, which pick up which the air monitors and the noise monitors pick up when they come into the range of those locators, and then that starts to build up a picture over time of not just air pollution in general and noise pollution in general, but it starts to pick up a very, very big picture as to what vehicle movements look like, and then attribute that to the specific pollution events that happen. It's run through a dashboard. It's a SaaS application, it's web-based, and it's a web-based application which anyone who has the product and service can log on to at any time and monitor, extract data in PDFs and Excel spreadsheets, however you want to do it. And that's simply how it works. So it's a technical piece with a SaaS platform to back everything up. It's cloud-based, the data is available at any time for anybody. So it's a really nice, slick solution, which is fairly new, and we haven't seen it yet in the marketplace. Specifically, EMSOL work with CRP to monitor noise pollution. So we're not going to focus on the air quality stuff today, as much as there is some data and information that we can give to anybody if they want it. So we wanted to reduce noise caused by deliveries in an urban environment. We chose Pavilion Road in the Kensington and Chelsea borough. We installed some noise monitoring and vehicle tracking systems to do this, and we tracked 31 vehicles. So at this point, what it's important to say is that, you know, we're going to concentrate on the vehicles that were specifically tracked, because this is the idea of EMSOL, is to really hone in on the sources of pollution. So just to give some context to that, so noise pollution was continuously monitored along supply chain activity, and the LEAQ is the equivalent continuous sound level. So think of it as the average noise level at any given time. So anyone who knows a little bit about this will tell you that noise pollution is very difficult to put into context sometimes. There is a lot of charts, there's a lot of information available, but it's very difficult to give context to noise and specifically attribute it to anything, which is why our solution is probably one of the best that you can use to specifically get a bit of a handle on noise pollution in general. An LCP is the peak sound pressure level with C frequency weighting. Think of that as any loud noises, so doors banging, car horns, police sirens, and those kinds of things. So what we found was, and I don't think this will be a surprise to many people, but the darker the stripe means the higher the noise levels were. So what we typically found is that on Sundays, as you'd expect, there's probably less traffic and less stuff going on the high street and that kind of thing. So Sundays were the best day in terms of noise levels, and as you can see, it's a huge difference compared to other days of the week, with Fridays being the highest in terms of noise pollution. And I think that's typical, and what we see on all of our deployments, especially in London, is that, you know, Fridays generally are the highest noise days of the week. And we're going to go on to show you the spikes throughout the day and give you some reasons as to why that is. So the noise pollution is definitely, well, you can correlate it to activity during the day. So as you can see here on the left, there is the noise levels in decibels, and across the bottom line there is the time of day. So this is averaged over 2 weeks. So this is just an average of 2 weeks, and this is in segments when we run the project. So as you'd expect, you can see the noise levels are typically quite low over the night, and then once the traffic starts to build up on a morning, you can see there that there is a big peak, and it continues throughout the day. Midday is probably the highest, and mid-afternoon gives you the highest levels in this particular area of London, and then it peters off, as you'd expect, overnight when the traffic and things like that get less and less and less. One of the things that what we're trying to do with this, and the reason that the tagging is so important, and this is taking it to a bit of a next level piece. One of the projects that we're doing right now is TfL are very interested in trying to tackle the congestion in London, as you'd expect. And anyone who's ever driven in London knows that it's not a nice experience generally. So one of the other projects outside of this one, and this is something to think about CRP down the line, is that we can give customers specific insights on not just the vehicle noise that they are producing throughout the times of the day, but we can even give them specific times of the day when it's better to fit in with noise pollution in general, so that they can get better community engagement and make sure that the deliveries are scheduled as such so that they have the least effect on pollution in general. And that's what we're trying to do with all of our clients typically. In terms of correlation between vehicles and noise and the activity of the supply chain, rather, you can cut that bit out at any time you like. So I'll say that again. EMSOL is able to correlate noise pollution to vehicle activities in the supply chain. So like we mentioned before, we had 31 vehicles tagged at this particular time. So just going to run through this one and spend a little bit of time on this one, just give you some context. So as you'd expect, V1 to 7 is the vehicle, and we had 31 vehicles tagged here, but this particularly focuses on the ones that we can see here. So along the bottom, you have the time, and that's the duration in minutes each particular vehicle came into range of our locators, and then the red line is the noise pollution levels at that time. So what you can see here is that there's specific correlation between vehicles being present in raising the noise levels. So for example, the first one in V1, that was there for what was that? That was from 7:05, and it was there for a few minutes. But what you can see is there's a straight spike between that vehicle coming onto or in range of the locator to that disappearing, and then the level goes down again. V2 again is the time in minutes. That was a quieter vehicle. You can see that dead specifically there. And then what you've also got to take into consideration on this graph is that there are peaks and troughs whereby we're not specifically identifying vehicles, but that is just because if you look at that across the bottom, that is the time when the traffic starts to build up, so you're going to get higher noise. But again, it's quite a difficult graph to read in the sense that you're always going to include the ambient noise, if you like. But what we're trying to do here is, like I said right at the beginning, is that we want to give you specific insight into the vehicles that you're interested in and not the ambient noise in the background. And as you can see, when we're specifically attributing vehicles, when they come into range of the locators, you can see there's a real correlation between the data and the noise levels when they're present. But again, this is a science that specifically only takes into account the interested vehicles. So in terms of this, the highest levels of noise pollution, so the arrival times, as you can see, they were in the afternoon, and these were to Pavilion Wine's vehicle visits. So as you can see, we're attributing data again, and there are definite spikes when the vehicles are present. But again, this is looking at the whole picture. What we didn't see in this particular project, and we typically would like to run these for longer periods of time. In the first 3 months, there are a lot of baseline settings that are a lot of baseline levels that we're trying to get right. So on this particular slide, what you can see there is that, you know, the longer you can see the noise levels creeping up when you have the vehicles on site, or when I say on site, we're talking about vehicles that are coming into range of our locators. So this there shows the direct correlation between those specific vehicles we have tracked and the noise levels that you can see. So in terms of next steps, we're conducting similar trials to measure the impact of vehicle supply chain pollution, and definitely the project that is of keen interest at the moment is the one with Transport for London, and we're doing that with a lot of there's some more players came into that in the last couple of months actually, which we can talk about later if you like. But the John Lewis partnership is a one that is of real interest, because one of the things that they struggle with in particular is community engagement. And we didn't talk about this, but it's worth talking about now, is that a lot of the time, the problem with noise pollution isn't the noise, it's the complaints that companies and organizations get from the local community. And really just to hit home the impact of where the EMSOL solution comes into play, is that it's very, very difficult to act upon a noise complaint after it's happened, because there are, you know, like I said at the beginning, you know, the data is always very, very retrospective, but at this point, generally, if there's a noise complaint, it must have been fairly loud, as you'd expect, but the EMSOL solution would have given and if it's attributable to your company or your organization in particular, the complaint would correlate with a breach, and therefore a message or an alert that you can get. So one of the things that this is really, really important to remember is that when you get the noise breach alerts from EMSOL, and if you get a complaint, you can say with a very, very good degree of accuracy whether or not that was attributable to you. And that's really, really important for any organization that has a lot of deliveries and a lot of supply chain in and around London. Again, another slide as to things that we're working on and the customers that we brought on board. Some of the events we've just actually one of the events that we're working on at the minute is the Mayor's Resilience Fund, and we are taking things into the carbon area on that. It's just a little bit of insight for you, and producing some new products and services alongside our core product, which is air quality and noise. I'm going to give you a quick insight into the dashboard. So one of the things that is available now is the access to the dashboard. So the dashboard, as you can see, it gives a lot of data, but this really puts into context. Sometimes the graphs and the insight into the graphs can be quite hard to explain, but certainly using the dashboard gives you a much better picture of that. So as you can see, and I talked about where you can export CSV files and PDF files for management reports and things like that. What you can also do is you can do that by time and date. So if there was a noise complaint, this is where this is really interesting for me, is that, you know, if there is a noise complaint that you receive and you have, you know, and that noise complaint has been made specifically against you, this is where you can go back and look. So if you didn't get a bridge, you can kind of back up that by looking at the data within the platform to go and see if any of your vehicles were present when that complaint was made. And if they weren't, then you can say with you know, 100% accuracy that, you know, you weren't to do with that complaint. Now, that may or may not improve community relations, but at least if you present that data back to the person who complained about it, at least you can tell them, and you can say with certainty that, you know, you are a good neighbour. And that's what is very, very important to most organisations now, is being a very, very good neighbour and being able to explain away their activity. Other things that you can see on here is you can choose the different types of pollution that you can look at. This will give you ongoing breaches in the top right hand corner, so you can see where there are particular problems in real time. You can see the number of breaches. We also have other bits in here which you can't show you, but there will be a list of vehicles in there. And what we're trying to do now is, and we think this is really important, is you know, for third party supply chain in particular, and people who are part of these projects and deployments that we do, we've changed things around a little bit to give a good list. So what we're trying to do is to encourage organisations to want to be top of that leaderboard. So there are leaderboards in there which will show all of the supply chain vehicles and NRMMs or objects of any interest, to show who are the best performing in terms of the least air quality problems that they're creating and noise pollution levels.
Thank you, Geoff, for that. It was really interesting. I think it would be really good, actually, Kate, if we can get some context, I think, to Pavilion Road especially, so why that location was picked out, and any kind of changes that have happened, like pedestrianisation or something, that would mean that this is necessary for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pavilion Road is a small village street, as we like to think it, in Kensington, Chelsea, just around the corner from Sloane Street and then King's Road. It was pedestrianised in the summer last year, and it has a school one end and lots of independent retailers down the street, with residents above and residents further down. So there's quite a few sensitive noise receptors with the school and the residents. And lots of smaller independent businesses for us to engage with and discuss, which I think we might have thought at the beginning was going to be an easier ride for supply chain engagement, and actually in retrospect might have been slightly more challenging. But it was a really interesting space to start trialing these sensors and really understanding what our risks are and where we might have problems with noise.
Yeah, and I think definitely a point to pick up on was that last year this was between restrictions, and Pavilion Road was very much it's very hospitality focused.
Yeah.
So the idea was also that the vehicles that were coming in potentially had refrigeration, they might be a little bit more sensitive to the noise. So yes, well, I think the getting supply chain on board is key, and hopefully, you know, the next step would be that there'd be more of them including I think, Kate, there was the waste truck contractor who was actually contacted as well to be involved.
Yeah, our waste carrier was involved. I think we'll come on to this in the challenges, but I think just the sheer number of vehicles is very challenging, and even when you've got one supplier engaged, they have a multitude of different fleet of vehicles that will come onto site. So you then need to be able to track every single one of those, which means that the number of vehicles you could be tracking gets very difficult to engage with. So that was definitely quite a challenge, and obviously particularly relevant to our waste contractors who really wanted to support the project, but had so many different vehicles that could have visited site. It made it quite hard.
Starts to make you see how much of the the supply chain needs to be involved. We might think that there's just one vehicle potentially come into that site, but actually there's plenty more that we aren't aware of, and it actually starts to look at a larger scale. I mean, so Geoff, you've kind of put on, you've already said a little bit about why it's so important, but what kind of is the feedback for freight operators about tracking noise and air quality at a delivery point? Why do you think it would make people more successful potentially?
Well, I think, and we will talk about some challenges, but Kate makes some really, really good points there. The third-party supply chain engagement is the biggest issue that we have. And one of the reasons for that is because typically people don't like to have any blame thrown towards them. So that was kind of the issue really in the beginning for EMSOL, is that, you know, we were one of the things, even the language is really important. So for example, some of our clients, they don't want us to call it an EMSOL breach. They just want that to be an alert, because the minute you say breach, it tells them that they're doing something wrong, and they don't want to kind of highlight that, and that becomes a real issue for you. And it's subjective as well. That's the issue. It's like nobody wants to go and present management information back to their managers or their board or whatever to say, oh, actually we've had like 1 million breaches this month, we're really bad. So that is an intrinsic problem, and that's why one of the things we're trying to do now is we're trying to create that as a good list as opposed to a naughty list, if that makes sense. So rather than rank order it in the worst performing vehicles, we rank order it in the best performing vehicles, so that we can encourage positive change. And the reason that that's important is community engagement, really, you know, especially in and around the boroughs in London, the high streets, pedestrian areas and things like that. It's because, you know, it's really, really important these days to be a good neighbour in terms of your business activities. And I think that's just in general, you know, being a good neighbour is a very, very good value as a business to have. You want to have the least impact on the local population that you can have. You want to get the best engagement, because that drives, you know, ultimately, it does drive, or it's one of the drivers for having a successful business. Because if you get deemed as kind of noisy, and, you know, there's always like smoke billowing out your kitchens and all of these kind of things, then people are less likely to want to engage with you as a business and want to be around you. And then word travels fast, right? You know, we have Facebook, you've got social media, it's all these kinds of things. So I think anything that companies can do, and again, back to the pandemic, I think if there was ever a time where air quality issues have been highlighted, it's because of the pandemic, right? Because we didn't have any issues. There was no planes in the sky, there was no vehicles on the road, so everyone enjoyed that good quality. So now I think what we'll start to see, and there's definitely consumer preference as well. We've done some research with retailers in particular, whereby consumer preference is really, really important to their outward story. So for example, you know, and I don't know about you guys, but certainly, and this is really personal, but this kind of plays out into the research, is that, you know, you want to buy from companies who are looking after the environment in the right way. And I think that is a big part of how you'll see retailers have success going forward. If you can prove you're a good neighbour, the environment that your employees are working in is got good clean air, you know, they're not breathing in, you know, any of these kinds of issues that weren't particularly prevalent pre-pandemic, are definitely coming further and further into everyone's vision.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's monitoring, it's having evidence-based, that they're not just saying I'm being good and I'm doing this, I'm actually making sure that I am, and I'm taking account of my impact. And I think it leads on really well to, you know, Kate, and for like a landowner thinking about this, and, you know, the sustainability strategy aspect of it. You know, why is it important to measure noise and air quality? I'm guessing, a bit like Geoff has said, like being a responsible landowner and understanding that. But from your point of view as a landowner, what do you see the benefits of doing this?
It's actually really interesting. We conducted quite a lot of community engagement throughout 2020 as part of our development of our new sustainability strategy, and really refining what was important to our community. And 59% of people said that air quality was their top environmental concern. And
Wow.
when you have over 2,000 of your local community tell you that, it's a really strong driver.
Yeah.
So our new sustainability strategy, Chelsea 2030, has 3 air quality related targets: to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, try and switch the remaining ones to electric, and then support that with relevant infrastructure. So this was a really key trial to help us understand the impact of vehicles, and so noise obviously being very closely related with air quality at the moment, whilst vehicles are predominantly fossil fueled and combustion engine.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting trial to start understanding the impact of vehicles across the estate and really get some more data about who's coming on and off the estate and the amount of, say, supply chain complexity that our operators have. But connected with that, we also have targets, and we're really keen to support health and well-being, which of course noise is a very key part of. And community cohesion. I mean, we want our estate and our community to get on well. And if our residents and our schools have got issues with, to be honest, the fundamental part of retail, which requires freight delivery in some form, that's quite problematic. So we need that to be as cohesive and as least impactful as it possibly can be.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you've both touched already on kind of the challenges that are there. And it would be good, kind of one from Geoff and one from Kate, on what you think potentially is the biggest challenge and how that could be overcome in the future to monitoring noise and air quality.
Yeah. So again, really good points, and we're focusing on that supply chain complexity. And you're right, it's got so many webs and tentacles and things like that. And some people want to be involved and others don't, and it's really difficult. So one of the ways that EMSOL are addressing that is that, if you think about this, every time technology is created, it gets faster and smaller as the years go by. Okay, and what we've tended to see, even in the kind of the 4 short years that we've been around as a company, the technology is already faster, smarter, smaller. So to get around the supply chain issue, sorry, excuse me, I'll get my teeth in, that might be a good help, right? So I'll start again. So one of the things that we've done recently is we've just put into the roadmap a different way of being able to track vehicles, because the tagging is cheap, it's cheerful and all of that kind of thing, but it does cause issues getting people on board. So the cost of low quality, high quality picture cameras now is very low. So what we're trying to do now is we're going to include an image related piece to that. And what that does, that gets us around the need to tag vehicles, because it's not quite ANPR technology, which recognizes number plates and things like that, but it does get us around that problem. So we would still like to keep tagging, because that's very specific. But if we install cameras, tiny little HD quality cameras that have night vision and all of this kind of thing, then we can build up a better picture without the need to have maybe intrusive tags in vehicles. That's kind of the proposition, really. And then the second part of that is, and again, this is why I love technology so much, especially in this space, is because there are now huge sound libraries. So as you know, noise is really difficult to monitor. It's really difficult to say what that noise was. And if you look at the scales, I mean, some of them have, on one scale, it'll say an electric toothbrush is the sound. And then on the next level, it'll say this is a tube train coming into the station. You think, well, hang on a minute, how does that work? Because it's 1 minute it's an electric toothbrush. So what we're doing is we're trying to create this huge sound library of what a motorbike sounds like, what a car engine sounds like. And the technology now, we can just pass that through our technology, and we can now start to see it. I mean, we're a ways away from this, by the way. The technology is getting better, like I said. But in the future, what we can do is we can say, right, that noise breach was a car alarm, that noise breach was a door slamming. We can start to give you that. So the technology is the thing that will overcome the issues, in my opinion, within the next kind of 2 years.
No, definitely. And it's great to hear the strides that are being done in the technology side and monitoring, and actually having like the dashboard, so that it's kind of not 2 months later do you find a report, you can actually straight away look at it. And Kate, from your point of view, especially from engaging with businesses on site or potentially supply chains, what do you feel like could make things easier, or actions that could help with that?
Actually, I think that camera is an excellent idea, because whilst a lot of our occupiers were really keen to take part in the trial and support us with this project, their supply chains are of course one step removed.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem I mentioned with different vehicles earlier, if you've got a substitute vehicle coming in and you only get a delivery once a week, then you can have quite disparate vehicles coming in and which is very difficult to track. But if you have a camera, as Geoff just mentioned, to take record images of vehicles and different vehicles coming in, I think you get a much wider base of vehicles that you can track. And of course, the other issue is really carefully picking your location for measurements. So one particular issue with Pavilion Road has one small service yard, one end, which is where the monitoring focused. But because of the pedestrianisation of the street, quite a lot of deliveries ended up coming in the other end of the street where there just wasn't any monitoring. And we didn't foresee that change of behaviour before the project started. So that was quite interesting. And I think a learning going forward would be to pick a location where deliveries are much more controlled. So a specific area where you've got better control of a service yard and less sort of people just turning up, quickly delivering and leaving again. So I think that would be an interesting sort of progression from the project, get better data on and identify opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. One of the things I didn't mention, which is really important, is that something that helps the identification of pollution related to organisations without vehicle tracking specifically, is that the EMSOL solution consumes all of the data from any of the LAQN networks in London and things like that. So we can compare that data and overlap it on top of our data. So you can kind of say, well, yes, that was a weather front because the LAQN network had a spike at the same time as you had a spike. It's where you see spikes that were present at your location when the LAQN networks and the local networks haven't got those spikes, and that does help you build a picture, but it doesn't identify it completely. So it's you know the technology gets better all the time, and I'm sure we'll have that nailed hopefully in the next year or two.
I think that's a really interesting point, that obviously the air quality network that's already in London is well established, actually, so that the monitoring on air quality has really kind of grown and become kind of a baseline that is needed to be monitored. Do you kind of feel, kind of going on the question what we've got here about the future, do you feel that something along the lines of noise pollution is nearly as important now as air quality, by actually having, for freight, I would say in particular, for freight impact, would you say that actually having both together is actually as important rather than just focusing on one of them?
Yeah, I think so. So certainly, and this is EMSOL's experience as well. So, you know, I haven't got any kind of research to back this up outside of EMSOL, but what I can say is that what you typically find is most of the complaints from the local communities come about noise. That's the reality of the situation. So, and my personal, and this again, it's my personal opinion, but people don't invest the time to monitor noise as well as they should, because it's difficult to do. That's the answer. It's just not easy to do, and that's the situation for everybody. So what we find is that, you know, concentrate on bringing really good technology and investing the time to research noise better from a technology point of view will help us overcome those challenges. Because the reality is that, you know, like I said, complaints come from noise. You know, when you can only complain about a dust cloud when you can see it. And that's not very often in the reality. Do you know what I mean? So it's very hard to walk outside and notice a difference in air quality. but when a loud noise is being made over and over again, you certainly can be affected by that in real time. So that's the issue, is that noise actually is probably more important to monitor in some instances. It's just the technology available isn't as good as what it is for air quality, and that's what we're trying to address.
Yeah. No, and I think it's really key to know also the ambient noise. So what is actually currently, especially Pavilion Road, I remember, you know, as soon as it was pedestrianised, there was a lot of people eating outside, and you know that's just there because people are there. So I think it's really, so like, Kate, from your point of view for the future for a landowner, like, do you believe that this kind of monitoring will happen more often when you're doing changes in space potentially, or just being a responsible neighbour, I guess, and understanding that tenants as well as residents having a better kind of cohesion with each other?
Absolutely. I think it is really important to measure, and I think we'll definitely look at continuing different forms of measurement as we go forwards. And I think longer term, as vehicles move towards electric and get quieter, it sort of adds an extra dimension to that, and gives you more data and more justification and more support really with your community for transitioning towards electric vehicles when things can be a lot quieter, and supporting low emission transport, which is a key part of our strategy.
Yeah. No, and I think it kind of comes on to the conclusion as such, but it shows that this is kind of a really good baseline study to understand if you were to take this on, what you need to be thinking about, especially the challenges with supply chain. I think that's something we really did notice when we were trying to tag vehicles and talk to suppliers, and that was quite a hard time of year to do that, especially during the restrictions. But it does enable the technology to be advanced, and actually to say this is a challenge, potentially we need to look at the technological solution and actually adapt that to potentially finding those gaps in the market. I think concluding this report, I would say there's a lot more still to do and a lot more learnings, but actually really impressed with the cohesion between air quality and noise, and for freight to be part of that conversation. As you said, they are the transport that leads us to go to businesses, that lead us to go to a restaurant. It has to be transported somehow, but actually for them to feel as a responsible freight operator that they're helping that end destination point, it's quite key. And also from a local authority or a landowner's point of view, monitoring that and feeling as a responsible borough or landowner that the impact is not detrimental to the community. So I just want to thank both my speakers for attending today and discussing the points of view, because I think it's really helped to get others to understand those challenges before they take on the same kind of journey. So thank you for coming.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And so we do have the report online on our website. So please go and have a look, and it does include some of the air pollution statistics that came out of this as well. So please take a look there. And if you would like to contact any of us, here are our details. This will be on the YouTube channel. We now do have a Facebook and Instagram page if you want to talk about noise in more detail with us, but we have more studies coming, so please look at the website for any new updates.